Once again from DPL Surveillance Equipment. Good morning, you guys. We're doing some chores over here and just taking care of some morning things that I typically do in the mornings. That's when I'm most busy, usually. So today we thought that we would do a podcast talking about an area that's not covered very much, but we see hints of it occurring in the world of economics, and it's going to be an interesting bit of controversy, if you will, in terms of what's going on. I think what's happening in the crypto space is it looks like Bitcoin is a catalyst for change on a number of different levels. One particular level that I want to cover right now, and hopefully you guys can get your heads around it, is in the world of central bankers and commercial banks. Those guys typically haven't had a problem working together very closely. Actually, a lot of people who aren't familiar with the role of central banks, or particularly our Federal Reserve and the commercial banks in the United States, a lot of people really they have a trouble understanding the difference, again, between central bankers or our Federal Reserve in the United States versus our commercial banks. That's because a lot of people just don't have the ability, the financial savviness to look at those banking institutions, either on a government level or on a corporate level, and accurately discern the difference. So we want to delve into that and see if we can not only give you an idea of which is which and what is what, but what's going on as far as there's a sort of competition going on. There's a certain amount of how do you say it? There's basically the financial pie is only so large, and the central bankers and the commercial bankers are trying to figure out who ultimately is going to come out on top and who has the potential of being left behind. So one of the things that the commercial banks are looking at is digital currencies, for instance. The digital currencies that a lot of nations are salivating over in terms of issuing them are an attempt to stave off Bitcoin and what Bitcoin represents. So the problem is Bitcoin is an attempt to circumvent the restrictiveness or the restrictions associated with our money. In other words, when it comes to the ability to send money and receive money in an individual nation or on a country-to-country basis, a lot of times it's in the best interest of the banks, the commercial banks particularly, to restrict who gets what. And since money is basically free speech, it's very compelling when someone tells you you can't use your free speech outside of this particular geographic region. In other words, speech is fine. What you say is fine, as long as we determine where, when, and how it happens. So when it comes to money, we have to keep in mind that we're being told one thing, and what we can do is quite another thing. So, and a lot of us have learned this very valuable lesson, for instance, with PayPal, when WikiLeaks wanted to let everybody know what the government was doing with the WikiLeaks initial leaking of the information about the cables going back and forth with certain government embassies and such. That resulted in PayPal, for instance, prohibiting people from donating money to WikiLeaks. So my point is basically that what we can do and what we can't do with our money is a very valuable tool for controlling the populations of the world. And if you have your own digital currency, like cryptocurrency in particular, you can literally stop communications. You can stop financial transactions in their tracks. So this is a problem. You know, if United States has a digital currency or the Fed coin, whatever you want to call it, if Russia or China, whoever, if they have their own individual digital country-based cryptocurrency, and they don't like what you're saying, what you're doing, or who you interact with, they can literally cut off and cut on your ability to communicate, depending upon who you are, where you are, what you're saying, what you're not saying, or whatever the criteria may be. So we need to keep in mind that this is a problem. This is a major problem. And where I'm going with the podcast today is, as we get closer and closer to complete digitalization of money, we're going to find that the banks who are typically in control of determining who sends money, who doesn't, how much, when and where and how, they're going to be challenged by the central bankers of the world to do the same function. And the reason why this particular competition, if you will, is arising is because more and more banks, more and more central bankers are realizing that this is the only way forward for handling money and finances, is to control it, and that's by issuing your own digital cryptocurrency to the masses. Now, if you're a bank, you have a real big problem because the central bankers typically have delegated a lot of that functionality to the banks, to the regular commercial banks. In other words, if you need a loan for a car, if you need a loan for a house, if you need a loan to expand your business, you typically go to your own bank, and that's where you handle that type of situation. Banks are typically on the front line, but going forward, according to what I understand, central banks want to have more and more of a say-so in terms of not only looking at satisfying loan demand. In other words, if you need a loan going forward in the future, you may have a type of money issued by your local, your country's central bank versus your commercial bank. Now, the issue presently, the concern is, can central bankers do a better job than the commercial banks? Now, the central bankers, they're almost forced to come up with a solution when it comes to money going forward, because they don't want to be left out. If commercial banks issue their own cryptocurrency or digital currency, then who needs a central bank, right? Central bankers are already having a difficult time doing their normal functions in terms of controlling interest rates and adjusting the issuance of money, slowing down economic activity, thus avoiding inflation or recessions or something like this. All of these things are typically handled by central banks. But again, as we approach more and more, as we approach a world where, there's going to be one centrally issued cryptocurrency for each country, now we need to figure out who's going to be in control. Is it going to be the commercial banks like Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo, who is actually going to play that role? So, and the central bankers, see, they don't want to give up that type of control. They won't have skin in the game. And Switzerland, as we speak, they are going to vote on whether or not their own central bank is going to supply loans versus to the citizens as compared to the commercial banks. And usually when one country adopts something like this or even looks at it, the other countries are going to want to do the same thing. They're going to want that. They're not going to be one left behind. No one wants to be left behind. So Switzerland, what happens in Switzerland as far as central banks having more of a role in terms of satisfying loan demand and such, that's going to spread, particularly if it goes through. That's going to spread. I guarantee you more central banks are going to say, you know what, maybe we don't need commercial banks at all. If I issue my own cryptocurrency for the country, then I can control the flow of money on a micro level. In other words, when it comes to paying taxes, when it comes to loan demand, when it comes to adjusting interest rates, when it comes to fighting terrorism, when it comes to fighting money laundering, when it comes to monitoring and surveilling citizens. See, these things are too compelling for central bankers to just give it up. Okay, even though they've never had this much control before, it's too compelling for them to not want to be right in the middle of all of that. That's what you call power and influence. When you have that much control, you have power and influence over what people can do, what they can't do on a very micro level. So central bankers typically have had control on a very macro level, on the big level, the big picture level, but never in history have they had so much, had they had the opportunity to exert so much control over the taxpayers and the citizens on a very micro level. So that's what's going to happen going forward. Just want to put this podcast out there to let you know that your local commercial bank really is staying up at night, whether or not you know it or not. They're staying up late at night trying to figure out what does the world look like, what role are they going to play, what role they're going to play going forward when it comes to being a participant in the new economy, where there's a digital currency. Who knows who's going to issue it, but the banks want to be able to maintain that control. And the central banks, they don't want to be relegated to the history books. They want to have a role, right? So that's where the fight is going to be. That's where the battleground is. And we'll have to see. But because Bitcoin has lasted so long and has stayed in the news and has survived so many different types of attacks on the government level, law enforcement level, regulatory level, that it seems like there's no stopping it. And it looks like the world has to bend. Not the Bitcoin, for instance, but the world has to bend to this new environment where you have a cryptocurrency that flows from border to border, person to person, allows citizens to keep thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, billions of dollars in their own personal wallet, hardware wallet, like the Trezor wallet or their Ledger Nano wallet or something like that, without someone being able to take it away from them. So things are changing very, very fast, and we just wanted to bring this to you guys' attention, so give you something to think about in terms of what Bitcoin is doing. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, there wouldn't be this type of competition with it for commercial banks pitted against the central bankers. There wouldn't be the need for it, right? You would buy the Fed coin, the shit coin, issued by the United States government, or the Russia shit coin, or the Chinese shit coin, and there wouldn't be any need to second guess or to even consider that there's anything out there except for your own country's shit coin. But now we have a choice. Now we have something that we can rely upon regardless of what your country issues. Now you have a fallback, you have an alternative, and we have competition. Never had competition for currency before. Now you do. Be aware of it, appreciate it, spread the word, go out, create a meetup, remind people to support and get involved, because this is the new world order. And if we can have competition in terms of what we can do with our money, and what money we use for transactions, and what monies we use for this and that and the other, that's a good thing. That's not a negative thing. Bitcoin doesn't put a gun to your head, doesn't send you to jail for not paying taxes, doesn't censor your transactions if you're from a country that is on someone's terrorist list, doesn't accuse you of money laundering just because somebody sent some money to somebody that you don't even know, and all of a sudden everybody who touches that currency is supposedly doing something bad. Okay, we shouldn't have a world where money is tainted or could be tainted or something like that. But so that's my point. Let's appreciate what we have, what we've accomplished, and capitalize on the progress that we're making. Okay, so anyway, we're going to end this podcast, and we're sure you guys have a great Monday, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.